Tonight we're going to turn the tables, and I, as a newspaperman, am going to ask Ed some questions. Now, Ed, of course, the people through the country know you pretty well, and they know, as I probably know, they probably know, as I know, that your family came from North Carolina down near Greensboro.
That's right.
And then your family, when you were about 6 years old, moved out to the Pacific Northwest, settled in the state of Washington. And then later on, after some struggle, you were graduated from Washington State College.
Accurate.
Huh? Accurate. But now I'd like to ask you some of the questions I imagine I'd like to ask you if you were in their living room. Now, for instance, suppose we talked about your family. I'd like to find out some of the things that, you know, sort of shaped your life and shaped your philosophy and shaped your career. What about your mother? She came from North Carolina, so can we assume that she was a Southern belle?
Yes, very small, about 98 pounds, blonde, blue-eyed. Still occasionally uses the sort of Elizabethan words you hear in the hill country in North Carolina. She speaks of fleshin', meaning to put on weight, of people who are fixin' to get married, and on occasion has referred to her 3 boys as young'uns.
Oh, I see. That's a very compact, a very concise picture in a few words of your mother. Was there anybody else close to you or whom you trust a great deal who gave you advice that was to prove later a sort of a guidepost?
Well, I remember a good piece of advice from Judge John Bassett Moore the first time I went to Europe. He gave me some notes of introduction, and then he said, no young man will ever accept advice from an old man, particularly if it's good advice. He said, nevertheless, I will venture to offer you some. He said, when you meet men whose names make headlines, your judgment will be vastly improved if you will attempt to view them as though clad only in their underwear.
That's a wonderful idea, you know. I think any newspaperman could appreciate that. All right, now then, you are armed and equipped with these various pieces of advice and your family background. You have brothers, haven't you?
Yes, 2.
2 brothers. Now, you went off to Europe. In the course of time, you came to meet Winston Churchill, who's probably his closest American friend. Now, I was very struck in this Churchill album, this new Churchill album you put out. I've been playing it at home. I was tremendously impressed by his choice, his noble choice of words and his magnificent way of phrasing them. I was wondering, does he talk that way when you're talking to him, say, as we're sitting here now? Does he talk that way?
To a considerable extent he does. He is certainly a connoisseur of phrases, and occasionally, even in private conversation, he will produce a phrase and then stop as though he'd heard it for the first time, smile, and then say, I rather like that. I think I should use it in a speech. A friend of his once went to lunch with him, came to see me later, and I asked him how he got on with the Prime Minister. And he said, I sat there for an hour and listened to those thunderous and well-rehearsed improvisations.
What, is he a very sentimental man? Is he very emotional?
No, yes. He cries rather easily. That he has in common with Mr. Lincoln. And with no sense of shame. I mean, tears, like laughter, represent a normal reaction, and he sees no reason apparently to be ashamed of it.
Ed, when was the first time you met General Eisenhower?
I think I met him once before he came to Europe as commander.
Well, I've met him, of course, banquets and that sort of thing. But what sort of a man is he?
Well, I can tell you one story that may illustrate what he was like during the war. Shortly after he arrived in London, I was walking down the street with him, and then he was wearing 3 stars on his shoulder. We encountered a young, upstanding, vigorous commando, British commando. He had the 3 pips of a captain on his shoulders. The young captain did not throw the general a salute, and I said to General Eisenhower, I think the captain thought you were of equal rank. And with no smile at all, he said, I would gladly trade rank with him if I could trade years with him. Another thing he did, Ed, the British Broadcasting Corporation asked me to do a profile of him shortly after he arrived. They didn't know very much about him. So I did it as best I could. And in the course of it, I said, no one knows whether this man is a great general or not because he hasn't fought any battles. And as soon as I got off the air, the telephone rang. The duty officer said the Supreme Commander wishes to speak with you. And I thought, here it comes. He came on the phone and said some gracious and generous things about the broadcast, and then he said, you must remember one thing. This war is not being fought to make a hotshot out of Ike Eisenhower. And he continued to proceed on that basis.
Now, you've known him so well. What particular faculty has he that enables him, such as when he was Supreme Commander, to get together a diverse group of men, different nationalities, and you get them all working together well?
Well, I would think above everything else what has been referred to as a good chairman of the board. The ability to sit there with 5 or 6 allies, with different opinions, different concepts of grand strategy, to listen and then to say, this is what we're going to do, and to carry them all with him.
Fine, Ed. Now, all of this is very, very interesting to me in sort of formulating your background and the person, seeing then the person you developed to. But time and again, it seemed to me that even so, though sometimes these people are of great stature politically or in other ways, that sometimes they become underdogs. And it's always seemed to me that instinctively there's something about you that compels you to rush to their aid. Now, where was that developed?
I don't think it's really underdogs, Ed. I think it is due process of law. I was in Germany before, during, and after Hitler came to power. Saw what happened there to individuals, to a free press, to the radio, to religion. Later on, I was in Vienna when the Nazis arrived. Saw it happen there again. After the war, good friends of mine were butchered by the communists in Poland and in Czechoslovakia. I was also in England during that great year when the British fought alone. And I think the most impressive thing that happened in that year was not physical courage, not individual acts of heroism. It was the fact that even in the autumn of 40, when the German bombers were through in the daylight, the RAF had committed everything except one squadron of Spitfires. And at that time, the British House of Commons spent 2 days debating the conditions under which enemy aliens were held on the Isle of Man, because though the island fell, they were going to be sure that there was no violation of the legal and human rights of individuals. I take the Bill of Rights literally and seriously.
I should think if every youngster in the country would, say, study it,
memorize it, and understand it. I think if that were to happen, the future of the Republic would be assured.
what do you think out there?